This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. A few seasons ago, we looked back at the city councils of the past, and we interviewed councilors from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and aughts. And we wrapped that up with a chat with former city manager Bob Steele. Today, we're going to wrap up our look back at planning board members with a chat with former planning director Steve Stancel. Steve was with the city from the mid-80s to the mid-aughts. I'll let him give you a little bit better idea of that. He started as a planner and grew into the planning director role, which is where I found him when I met him in 1996. Steve, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much, Chris.
So, did I get that right? You started in the mid-80s?
Yes, 1986. So
86 to, if I recall, it was like late February of 07, maybe March 1st.
That's right, March 1st of 2007.
You know, we'll work backwards. I remember sitting in Riverbend having lunch, and you came in, and you were like, guess what I just did? I just gave my letter of resignation. Retiring. When you left, you went down to Florida, right?
Sarasota, Florida, that's correct.
And you continued your career there, and you've only recently moved back to New Hampshire.
Yes. In 2007, I went and worked for the city of Sarasota, Florida. And I started out as their downtown redevelopment specialist. And then I became the general manager of economic development for the city and retired in 2020 and moved back to the Seacoast area.
Now that we've got the end, let's start at the beginning. You started with the city in 86. Was this your first role or had you worked in other professional environments?
Well, I worked for, when I first got out of college, I graduated from UNH in 1980. And for the first 5 years or 4 or 5 years, I worked for Rockingham Community Action Program, which is a social service agency that deals with providing a number of different services to low-income families throughout the Seacoast area. In 1984-85, I went to work for the New Hampshire Office of State Planning, and I worked there for 2 years doing the coastal program for the state. And in 1986, Bill Collins, who was the planning director at the time in Dover, advertised for a position. I was living in the Portsmouth area at the time, wanted to get back to the Seacoast area for a job, and I applied for the position. It just so happened that I was interested in the position because I had grown up in the city of Dover, so it was a great possible opportunity. At the same time, I applied for a job in Sanford, Maine, and I was offered the planning director position there. So I had to tell them to hold off and wait and go back to Dover and say, Bill, you have to make a decision because this is what's happening. I'd rather work for the city of Dover. And thankfully, he hired me, and the rest is history. And I thank my lucky stars every day for getting the Dover job. And again, because I grew up in the city, it was just a fantastic position.
And you and I have talked about that over the years because it's something we have in common. Was having grown up here, you have that perspective. And I think that not to take away from those that don't have that luxury of working and growing up in the same community, but there is I don't know if it's an edge, but there's at least a familiarity level. Dennis Ciotti, who you knew well, and I know, he used to say, you actually speak authentically. Like you can tell when someone grew up here, they have memories that are either, even if they're manufactured memories based on what you recall,
right,
it still has an authenticity.
Right. And, history plays a big role in planning. And, having grown up in the community, the history, the people. Yeah. And so it's a big advantage in terms of, you look backward to look forward and in planning.
So speaking of looking forward, when you were brought on in 86 is pretty unique in the sense that the planning director and the planner had left, and Stratford Regional was acting in a planning director capacity for a while, and then Bill was brought in. So he really got to form a new nucleus with you and really create. There's like a disconnect in my mind. For things that happened prior to that with Tim Sheldon and others through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then that break point in my mind of Bill, then you, then me, then now Donna, that you see a different level of professionalism. I think you see a different level of respect at the staff level for the planning board and the planning board back to the staff level.
Right. I think that, Bill came to the city. He was highly decorated, great education and great experience. And I think Dover was lucky at the time to be able to get a person like Bill, because Dover in that time period, it was starting to grow exponentially. It came from very blue collar roots, and the zoning in the city, for example, was 88% zoned residential. There was very little zoned commercial. I think Dover's was going to end up being a bedroom community, essentially. And with the tax structure the way it is in the state, residential development doesn't pay for itself in terms of revenue generated and services required. Yeah. So you need that non-residential development. And if it wasn't for Bill, and what we attempted to do almost immediately from that period was to try to generate a more balanced growth within the community.
About 7 years you're in that role, and then Bill decides to move on to another community. Was it just clear to you that you wanted to be the planning director, or was it a recruitment? Did the manager come to you and ask if you were interested? Was it an open call? What was that like?
Well, they immediately made me acting planner. I wanted to be the planner, but the community went through an exhaustive approach to hire from the outside. I think I had a lot of support within the community, which really helped me. Yeah. And what I attempted to do was take the bull by the horns and move forward. So I didn't just sit on my laurels. I started a rezoning process. I took the initiative, and I think I ended up being the acting city planning director for 3 years before finally receiving the official designation.
I can imagine that on one hand, it's kind of fun in that role in the sense that I can go backwards if I need to. On the other hand, it's like, what is going on? You're being pushed and pulled. Give me the job.
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking.
It's like a 3-year audition.
It was a little nerve-wracking, and I think also, they didn't fill the position that I was in.
That's what I was going to say.
For a couple of those years. So we were short-staffed as well. It was a very hectic time period. And of course, I was just starting out, recently married, starting to have a family. So from a professional and economic standpoint, it was a bit nerve-wracking.
So that period, the late 80s into that mid-90s, that's when there was Enterprise Park development and envisioning, rezoning of 6th Street, talk about going from residential to commercial, and then the flourish of the executive technology and getting Liberty, at least their first buildings, underway. It had to have been a pretty go time period.
It was. I mean, immediately in the late 80s, we had to get Liberty to come to the mill first. The mill was empty, so we started out first with being able to get Liberty relocated within the mills. And then we went through the process of rezoning 6th Street, rezoning Enterprise Park area. And that was really the beginning of trying to get some of these residential acreage back into the commercial area.
One thing that I'm curious your perspective on is, as I alluded to, you and I met in 96, and I was still in college. I was doing my senior thesis on the waterfront that was just about to start. And I remember interviewing you and Dana Lynch, and somewhere I still have the videotape from Continental Cablevision when you guys were on doing that representation of it. And I'm curious, you always hear, for 30 years we've been looking at the waterfront. My read of some of the background materials is really like late 70s, early 80s, because there was the Cachego River diversion study and there was a Pacific Mill reuse study, which kind of is in the same area at least.
Right.
From your perspective, when does that really start to become a project?
I want to say early 90s. Well, the late 80s, of course, we wanted to get the mills filled.
Yeah.
So we were able to get Liberty Mutual and some of the old, what we call the Claristat mill, developed. But it was in the early 90s that we really started to push forward on the waterfront. We went after federal monies to dredge the river because the problem with the river at the time is the draft, and it wasn't deep enough during low tide to be able to have a good, decent-sized boats come up. So we were able to go after federal monies to dredge, and we went after moving the public works facility, putting in at first a pedestrian bridge across the river, and then going after federal monies for a future vehicular bridge. All that, I want to say, occurred in the early 90s period.
So you're progressing along, the community is changing. What are some of the planning trends that you look back from that period and they're either clearly the building blocks we have today or that's of the time?
Well, I think the first was rezoning. I think that foremost was probably one of the biggest things. Then also we not only rezoned, but we actually put the infrastructure in up on 6th Street and Enterprise Park so that it was ready to go for development, which because we did that, Liberty, when they were looking to move out of the mill, they were able to stay in Dover by purchasing that piece of land, which was ready to go. We went through the zoning as part of that, going from all residential to commercial. We went through a numerous zoning changes. I want to say we put 460 or 70 different changes at the time. Some of them were aimed at just rezoning land from residential to commercial, but it was also at protecting the environment. We increased setbacks from rivers and wetlands. They went from 50 feet to 100 feet. We took out any 20% slopes or any wetlands in your property from being counted towards your minimum lot size. So all of this was really set at not only providing more land for commercial development, but also trying to reduce the number of potential future residential buildings in the future.
I'm thinking through a couple of follow-up questions, but I want to pivot for a second to the planning board. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned in the intro, we've interviewed 4 former planning board members, George McLaris from the 80s, Ron Cole from the 90s, John Schwartzgruber from the aughts, and Kurt Schumann from the 2010s. And I think, actually, if I remember my timeline right, Kurt was probably just starting on the planning board when you were transitioning out in the mid-aughts. So all 4 of them you would have had some interaction with at one level or another.
Oh, sure.
When you go from being a planner to the planning director, what is that like at the planning board?
Well, it helped that I had grown up in the community because, I graduated with George McLaris. Oh, really? I graduated with Parks Christianberry. That was all the classes. That was 1975. So I knew these guys. It worked in my favor, I think, in being able to work with them more easily. One of the things that we tried to do, and that I tried to do foremost when it comes to working with the board, is we tried to increase our education for the board members. I think it's incredibly important that the board members not only learn about the community, but the interactions of being a planning board member. And there are programs that the state had, there were programs that the regional planning agencies had, and we would make sure that we provided monies and rides or whatever it took to get our board members to these training events. And that paid off significantly in the future because that really made our boards professional, or kept our boards professional. It wasn't just, everybody knows everybody and whatnot. It was, okay, this is how you do it.
Are there projects that you look back on, I guess we're sitting in one of them, right? We're sitting in the McConnell Center, which started and progressed through your term.
Right.
Are there projects, and maybe it's the Liberty project you already mentioned, but that stand out that when you do have the opportunity to visit Dover that you think about?
There are. And, it's one of the things, it's fascinating how long things can take to develop. And you mentioned the waterfront, and it's been 30 years. Now it's finally coming to fruition. I can't wait to see the end of it. But, as part of that waterfront development, I think I mentioned before, we had to move the public works facility. Yeah. We not only had to dredge the river, we had to move the public works facility. But then the McConnell Center came along, and we were able to convince the city to save the McConnell Center and rehab it and use it. And that allowed us to be able to move the Parks and Rec facility over to here, and that made the Parks and Rec facility available. And one of my greatest accomplishments in my mind was being able to talk the New Hampshire Children's Museum out of Portsmouth to come to Dover. And, we went to their board. They were having a hard time. They couldn't expand in Portsmouth. They wanted to expand this. And we went to their board meetings in Portsmouth, and we said, hey, look, we have this wonderful facility. Why don't you come to Dover? We had to present them with all kinds of demographic information because, you're used to being in Portsmouth. Oh, well, what is Dover? We don't know Dover. So we had to, show all the demographics, the number of families we have, the fact that we draw from Maine and parts north was a big selling point to them. So getting the Children's Museum here was big.
They recently had a ribbon cutting where they took the old boxing gym up on in the loft and turned it into a space. And so I went on behalf of the city to the ribbon cutting, and I remembered sitting down on the gym floor in one of the meetings where we were showing them that demographic material and giving them a sense of the space. And we've since had Jane Bard, who's the current director for the museum, and she said, Dover dated us. Dover wooed us and showed us. In our previous location, we had kind of been taken advantage of because no one thought we'd ever leave.
Right.
And they were impressed by that effort that you made. I also recall sitting in a room with then Recreation Director Gary Bannon and saying, hey, guess what? You're moving.
Right.
Because that was not Gary's first choice.
Yes, I don't think that they thought they were going to be moving any time. So it was interesting. But, it's all part of the puzzle pieces for redeveloping the downtown and the waterfront. And so, piece by piece, we move forward with doing things like that. Getting the train station here, people said it couldn't be done. We had train service in the city for years that ended, I think in the 50s or 60s. And, the line was owned privately, but we worked with other communities along between Boston and Portland, and we were able to get Amtrak to come back to Dover. And, I think that's another piece. And so, things like that are what I remember. One of the biggest things I remember, we had as part of our community development program, we created the Dover Economic Loan Program. Yep. And we were able to give loans up to $50,000 to businesses, new businesses to come into the community. Well, one of our biggest successes was Planet Fitness, right? And we gave Planet Fitness the first $50,000 for them to be able to get additional loan monies from the private sector and go into the mill. So, we not only gained a new business in the community, we were able to fill up a part of the mill, and look where Planet Fitness is today.
Yeah, speaking of the block grant program, there are two projects that I typically point out that I appreciate being part of. One is the McConnell Center, because to transform a 103,000 square foot neglected school into the social service multifunctional hub it is pretty amazing to think back on. It's also amazing to me to think back on it. The budget was like $3.5 million, which was astronomical at the time. And, now we couldn't build a fire station for that. And I'm not saying that that's a true number. But the second project is the Liberty. When they bought that land, there were the 9 or 10 homes that the city moved to Alden and Wilbrod.
Right.
And I remember bringing refrigerators in and hooking up stoves and refrigerators with Rick and Bruce.
Right.
And that's one of those programs. And then, doing the auction to get low mod people into those.
Right.
That's a project that can't happen today, but it is something that anyone that touched that should be proud of. We
had to be very proactive in those days. You're talking about the McConnell Center. I mean, here we had this empty building, and the initial costs, I think, were closer to 1.5. And as they grow, people got even more nervous. But we had to go out and find people or agencies and tenants to come here. We had to prove that it could happen before we could even get off the dime. So I still think the only intern I ever had to fire was the one that I had on this project. It was one of those projects, and then during the rehab process, what a mess. I mean, this building was left in pretty bad shape. The day that the vermiculite was thrown out the windows, remember the health officer shut us down? Because you turn around from your office at City Hall and you can see all the old science rooms there. Yeah. It was... demolition was a different thing. It was. And then we tried to always do things right. And I think we were very ahead of our time in some respects, but cutting edge in terms of Liberty Mutual and moving those houses. And, every project that we ever did, we thought out of the box and did things like almost every project. If we were close to something that we could use a future access easement to continue a trail, or to even think 20 years in the future for a future trail, we had that easement, and eventually they all came together for the Dover Community Trail. So it's things that maybe a planner that came from outside of the community might not have thought of or long term. But if you grew up in the community and you know where the community had been and how important these things are, they really play a role as you plan. Let's fast forward. We've sort of covered the 80s and 90s. You're now in the aughts, and at some point you have to think to yourself, I've done what I wanted to do here. Florida seems like a better spot. Yeah, I think Dover was in a good place. It was still growing, but we had, I think, did a good job with setting it up well for the future. And so my kids had graduated, except for my youngest. And so it was at a good point for me and career-wise to look at the possibility of going south. And I tell this story, which isn't really relevant here, that I was coming home from a cruise one night, and at 1 a.m., I call my sons at the house from Boston saying, we're on our way home. And they say, oh, that's great, Dad. The fire department just left. We get home, and it had snowed earlier in the week. My 3 teenage sons hadn't shoveled the driveway. Then it had rained, and the rain couldn't get to the street, so it backed into my garage and down the basement. And so fire department had to come and pump out the basement. So that morning, I'm on a cruise ship in Florida, and then about 12 hours later, I'm out with a pickaxe at 10 below, trying to cut a trough to the road so that the water could drain in the future. And so that's when I decided, well, it may be time to go to warmer climates. Yeah, I can see why that would work that way. Yeah, I don't know if you ever did this, but I used to tell my son that when I left town, I had to tell the police chief so he'd be aware, and they'd be doing extra surveillance, which didn't occur, but he bought it as a anti-partying aspect. Yeah. The other thing, too, that I knew it was time to go, and I felt comfortable about it, was because of my staff. I was very lucky during my period to have great staff that stayed. And one of the things, that I always try to do, it's important, I think, as a manager to understand what your staff's really good at and maybe what they might not know how to do, and to try to work with the staff on the various projects to match them up well to get the job done. And so, I always tried to do that. And I think we were able to because of that, we were able to keep our staff together. We weren't all buddies constantly, but we all respected each other.
And we all recognized our different skill sets. Yes. Steve was always the bird, was always the pull the string and say, what does this RSA say? And he could just rattle it right off, and he knew the checklist back and forth. Right. Woody was the one that didn't understand what a checklist was to save his life, but knew transportation.
And as a great transportation planner, yeah.
So, yeah, it was a good nucleus, and
you were the brains behind the department. He really was. Chris was brilliant.
Yeah. One of the things I always tell people, especially the young people that come in, was one of the things that you told me when we did the McConnell Center. You might remember. So Woody was on military leave, the Gulf War.
That's right.
Or after 9/11. Excuse me. It was after 9/11. Because I had been in community services, and you and the manager, Beecher, at the time, called me in and said, we'll move you over, but when he comes back, we can't fund you. Right. And I talked to my wife, and we said, it's going to be a resume building thing at the very least. So I came over, and you said, if you want to stay, you better figure out how to stand out. And so I was like, give me the project that no one wants. let's figure out how to do that. And it was a great learning experience, because then I could see nuances that other people might not have seen. I think I sat in like every meeting I could with you just to learn and to better see where the different cogs came together. Because I truly believe that the manager's office, the executive department, is certainly leading things, but planning is the spoke and hub scenario. Every other department has some interconnection to the department, because if you're not thinking ahead and if you're not recognizing how you're all interconnected, it's all going to fall apart.
Right. And we were able to expand because of the work we did and the great jobs that we did. I think we didn't have much of a problem with convincing the city manager and the city council to add staff through the years. So,
right.
Very lucky.
Yeah, right. From 2002, 2007, every year, I think there was only one year I remember you pulling me in and saying, you're the low man on the totem pole. This might be the year. And it didn't happen then.
Right.
And it was in 2007 when you left, and the manager was pretty clear to all three, Bruce, Steve, and I, that one of us was going to get promoted and that position was not getting backfilled. Sounds very similar to the mid-90s.
Yes, it does.
And I think it was 2015 when we added that position back. Mm-hmm. It was 8 years before. Ironically, it's the current planning director that was that higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every year we had to go through the budget process and essentially fight for our budget. Oftentimes it was easy for us because I think I could show many times where, from an economic standpoint, we were benefiting the community far more than what we were costing the community.
Right.
And when you can do that to the politicians, it makes it a lot easier to get your budget approved.
I was asked the other day by someone that's in the engineering office. They said they heard a reference to something called Weeks Traffic Circle, and they wanted to know where that was. And so I was explaining Weeks Traffic Circle, which that must have been 94 or 95 when that went away. And I went back and I found a budget presentation that I had done. The theme was return on investment, and showing here's what things used to look like and here's what things do look like. And so I used the train, I used the community trail, I used Weeks Traffic Circle, which granted was a state project, but I'm just sort of reminding people of, if you don't properly plan for things, if you don't put good, thoughtful planning in place, you don't have these things we now take for granted. I still think Weeks Traffic Circle was a better use of the space up there, but mainly that's because I missed the gas station that was in the middle.
Well, I still don't think they've got the lights timed correctly up there, even after 20 years, 5 years.
Yeah, it's Somersworth is still the preeminent driver there. The state times them for Somersworth.
Yeah, I go through it all the time, and I'm like, wow, I don't know. I'm not sure this is functioning like it was meant to.
The state told me once there were two main reasons for that. The first was that Dover pushed for Weeks Lane to connect through to Indian Brook when it wasn't supposed to. So you have a light that's too close there, and that the Kelwyn Drive light was not supposed to be there. But Somersworth pushed for that. And that if you took those two lights out, it would all function much better. And I said, right, but they're there, so we should fix the timing to account for those being there. The conversation has been good. I'm glad you were able to make time to come in, and I appreciate that. I always think back fondly on working for you and learning from you, and both on the social side, because even though there's probably 18 years difference between us, you didn't treat me as a kid. You treated me as a colleague, and I always appreciated that. So the sort of social, cultural side of it, as well as the leadership side of it and the planning side of it. I like to say, I remember on Tuesdays of planning board meeting days, you were always like, afternoon, do not bug me. You had your legal sheets, which I found so many legal pads when you left. Legal pads where you would plot out what you were going to say that day, how you were going to answer questions. And the rule around the office was, unless Steve calls you, you were leaving Steve alone. And I always think back on, I don't prep that much, but still more than some other colleagues I could point to who were like, there's a meeting tonight? Oh, I might as well show up and see what I say.
I tell people, well, I don't tell many people this, but I know my limitations, my personal limitations, and I'm not the type of person that can, off the top of my head, spew a lot of things. And so I often have to think in advance, anticipate all the questions, and know all the answers and try to write them down and be fully prepared. Other people don't need to do that. I always had to. And that's one of the things I appreciated about you, Chris. I mean, I wasn't joking about you being the brains in the department, but, you came from George Washington, you were quick. And I used that to our advantage in the department. I relied on you a lot for thinking things out. And I appreciate that.
Oh. The Mutual Appreciation Society. Based on your last comment, I'm going to wrap this up with a question to you. Is there anything you expected to be asked today that you weren't asked? The classic interview question.
Well, I don't think so. I'm even as we were sitting here between questions, I was trying to think of other projects that I hold highly, and I know there's some out there that I've forgotten. We worked on getting the new General Sullivan Bridge built through the years, the community trails, environmental protection.
I remember 2002 or 3, there were 50 zoning amendments, and that was the year we went. We had poorly drained and very poorly drained soils, and we were going to one wetlands, and 50 foot, which is still what it is. And that's the year we also added the word contiguous to the minimum lot size, upland heavy contiguous. Right. And I remember the day after that got approved, which that was a late night. I don't remember if you remember, or don't know if you remember, but that council meeting went to like midnight, if not later. Mm-hmm. And the next day, you and I and Bird were sitting around, and we were like, did anyone read all these things that just got approved? Because it was a drastic change as you go, especially the 50 and 75 foot wetland to go to a strict 50, no matter what the drainage was. And that's the year we went to jurisdictional wetlands as opposed to the poorly area, so that's the tripartite. I think that's when we added in the yield plan for a couple of things. There was a lot on that council agenda. I also remember things about after that night that I won't bring up on the podcast, but we can talk about later.
There was
the protest petition on Dover Point when we were going to rezone Williams, Follansbee, that whole stretch to commercial, and Williams brought in a protest petition, and you and I are sitting in the front row of the queues, and I said something like, "That's not a protest, but that doesn't meet the rules." And Alex Nossif was the mayor, and he basically told me to shut up and then told you to control your staff. And then we took a break, and Paul Beecher comes over, and he's like, he's right. Like, you can't do that in a meeting.
Well, the process to change zoning in the state, it's so cumbersome that and you have to hold so many public hearings, so that you don't really want to go through like one zoning change at a time. So as I recall, there were two major rezoning processes that we went through. One had like 70, and then I think the other one was 50. And I think it worked well from a planning perspective, putting that many up all at once, because oftentimes one or two of them would become lightning rods, and the rest people would, sort of forgive or be more flexible on, so that you were able to get 98, 99% of the zoning changes.
That, and it shows the holistic thinking.
Yeah.
It shows that you're looking at the full community, not targeting specific areas, that you're thinking big box there.
Right. And we always took the time to educate the community on the changes. Just throw them out there. This is why we're doing it. We would hold numerous public hearings, and I think that paid off for us. And people could see why we were doing things and how it made sense.
Well, again, I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate the kudos as well, and I certainly offer my appreciation to you for your time served here as a community member and as a resident.
Thank you, Chris. Again, it was my pleasure, and I was lucky to be able to work for the city of Dover for 21 years, or close to 21 years, and I look back on it fondly, and I wouldn't have done anything else. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Chris.
From time to time, we like to check in with some unsung heroes here in the city of Dover. One such, in my mind, is the Community Services Department. When you need water and you turn on the tap, you want water there. And when you need to flush the toilet, you want it to go somewhere. And when you drive on a road, you want it to be paved. All those things are part of the background work that the Community Services Department does. And as we celebrate Public Works Week, we're excited to have Ken Mavrogeorge here with us. Ken's our city engineer, and he is representing the Community Services Department for us today. Welcome, Ken.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So I mentioned some of those background things. Are there other things that people might not think that are public works related that we do here in the city?
Yeah. So community services, I like to think of it as a glorified public works, but it encompasses everything from parks maintenance, facilities maintenance, upkeeping our municipal buildings, our playgrounds, and everything, as you mentioned, water, sewer, drainage.
Drainage, that's a good one, because
Yes.
even though we had the high profile of the stormwater utility a few years ago, Bill Belanger, who is since retired, sort of, I remember when I first started with the city, he ingrained in me that drainage was the forgotten utility. It's kind of like the stepchild utility. We know it's there, but no one wants to actually acknowledge it's an important thing, and it really is.
Absolutely. So, back before you had storm sewer and sanitary sewer, it was combined. So it really, truly was a core utility. Municipalities needed to get stormwater off the streets, and so it was combined with sewer when it all ended up in the same place, ultimately in rivers and in the ocean. And back in the 70s, that's when the major effort within Dover, at least, was to separate them and develop a standalone storm drainage system and a standalone sanitary sewer system. It is really a key component of what makes the city function, because without it, you would have water in your streets and backyards and roadways washed out continuously. So it's really important that we fund it, keep it in good working condition, and improve on the quality of water that we put back into the river, streams, and ponds in the area.
I mentioned it's Public Works Week, and congratulations.
Thank you.
How is the city celebrating Public Works Week?
So community services, we like to celebrate Public Works Week by hosting our annual open house. So this is the second year we've done it in a row. Last year we had a great attendance. We had almost 500 attendees, probably significantly more that attended. We had a large touch truck event, off-site parking, and everyone, I think, unanimously thought it was a very big success. We're hoping to do it again this year, but this time a little bit bigger and better than before. We've already signed up a number of attendees from last year, including Rochester Motorsports, Morris Crane, police department, fire department, waste management will bring their trucks, and we're trying to get some new attendees as well, including Snapology will have a booth set up with some activities for kids. We're going to have some vendors, some consultants that we work with pretty frequently in terms of engineering firms who will present on projects in and around Dover that impact the lives of everyone as part of the community, as part of Public Works. We generally in community services like to show appreciation for the employees of Public Works by hosting a public employee luncheon at community services where we bring some food and we say a big thank you for everyone for everything they do throughout the year. It's also a nice way to head into the summer, which can be a pretty busy time,
right?
And a good thank you for all the hard work during the winter with the plowing and in responses to emergencies during the less desirable weather that we have.
So the open house, what are the times on that? I might have missed it. I apologize.
So this year's open house is going to be Saturday, May 17th from 11 to 2 p.m. We are going to be at 271 Mast Road, which is our main office for community services. There is some parking, limited parking on site, but the majority of parking will be off site, and we will provide a shuttle free of charge to bring people from that off-site parking to our facility.
And there'll be signage to direct people where the off-site parking is?
Absolutely.
Is it an indoor-outdoor event? Meaning, you say it's an open house, so am I looking at the outside and the things going on, the trucks outside, or can someone actually come in and see what the facility inside looks like as well?
So what we're hoping to do is it's really not going to be a weather dependent activity. So if the weather is nice, we'd like to have it outside as much as possible. The touch truck event will be surrounding the entire facility.
Great.
So you'll get to see everything. All the sheds will be viewable, accessible. There will be the large bay doors maybe open for, you could see where all the trucks, as I like to call them with my kids, is where the trucks sleep at night. The facility itself will be, open to the public. We will, if it does rain, we will try to move some of the booths and presentations inside into the main bay, with the touch of trucks still being held outside.
Beyond the touch of truck and beyond the booths, the vendor space, and the educational opportunities, are there any food or games or things of that nature?
So this year, we're once again going to offer free ice cream. Last year, we offered free ice cream. Myself,
John ate it all.
Not quite. We did get some 3 different flavors from Lickies and Chewies, and we're able to hand that out to attendees in souvenir cups. Once again, we are going to be doing that. We are trying to secure at least one food vendor, one food truck. We're working on the fine details on that, so stay tuned. We will have, as I mentioned, Snapology is going to provide some activities for kids. We'll once again have our world famous Paint a Plow event. So you can see the painted plow as it's plowing the streets this winter. And we're hoping to get some, sidewalk chalk and just activities where kids and families can enjoy the day.
Now, one of the things that we have struggled with, and we've been pretty open on, is recruitment, and that across the board, across the organization, we're continually looking for new employees, new people to join the team. I know community services is not immune to that. Will you have opportunities for people to learn about potential jobs if they're interested in not just touching the truck, but driving the truck?
Absolutely. So that's a great point. I think one of the things to remember is that we often say that Dover is a community of 30,000 traffic engineers or 30,000 opinions about one thing or another. And that's a good thing, right? Is that if you're in a community that is silent, that doesn't engage, then, you're not really in a community at all.
Right. You can't improve if you don't know what's going on.
Right. So we often listen to the community and listen to the feedback and try to find ways to improve. But the best way we can improve is to have members of the community join our team, help us identify areas that need to be improved, and work with us. We have plenty of openings on our staff, and we'll have the ability to scan for a job application and submit an application directly to community services. And if there's anyone who has questions about an opportunity with Public Works, with community services, they can many of our employees will be volunteering that day, and we'll be happy to answer any questions about benefits or work schedules or flexibility or whatever the concerns might be or questions you might have.
One of the things that I think people don't grasp but makes sense when they hear it is that the evolution of what public works or what community services entails really lends itself to a broad current hiring market, meaning you could have gone to college. It's not just, I need a laborer. I need someone that can shovel or can implement. There across the board, there's opportunity, and there's great opportunity for advancement. I say myself, I started out in utilities and moved up through, and everyone has a good opportunity base if they start in community services. It's not you get locked into something. Whether that's horizontal movement or vertical movement, we've had great luck with folks coming in and getting experience and exposure and moving through the organization.
Absolutely. I think that's one thing that really makes our department stand out amongst all the departments within the city, is that there are so many different avenues for someone. You may have someone working on a water main, water break today, who's overseeing engineering projects tomorrow, someone who's driving a plow truck today or tomorrow and is going to be responsible for maintaining parks and cemeteries and so forth. So we have admin staff, bookkeepers. We need people who can look in financials and help keep the city running and operational. There's just no end in sight to, if you want to do something, usually we can find something to do in community services.
So 17th from 11 to 2, open house. To me, that means it's drop in, that there's no set schedule. I can come at 11, I can come at 1:45. Hopefully I don't come right at 2. But is that pretty flexible? Am I got that right?
Absolutely. So the event will start at 11 o'clock. Generally, we have a little bit of a setup time before then. So we really encourage people to hold off and wait till 11 a.m. There will be some tours to the treatment plant down on Pudding Hill that just opened up last year. State-of-the-art treatment plant, which is now operational. So we should have some tours offered there. But as you said, we want to try to keep folks coming and going throughout the day. If we can get a food vendor in there, it will be great. It'll be right over lunchtime. But the nice thing about last year is that it's really close to downtown. It's close to all the, it's not far away from anything really, as nothing is in Dover. But so if you're in the surrounding areas and you want to come to the event, hop on down on Durham Road and head on downtown and grab something to eat. So it's really a family-friendly event that we're excited about.
Is the recycling center going to have its normal hours that day? So will it still be open?
They should have their normal hours. We may have to adjust them slightly to accommodate the increase in traffic, but we like to take advantage of folks coming to the recycling center and noticing that, hey, there's a large activity next door. So if we can grab those onlookers, then they're more than welcome to join us.
If someone wants more information between now and Saturday, how would they get it?
They can call us at 603-516-6450, and our staff is going to be happy to provide any information that we can. Our website is always going to be updated, and we'll try to get out as much information about new vendors, new attendees, and any changes on parking or times that as we get closer to the event. If anything happens weather-wise, we'll make announcements known that through that media avenue.
Great. So if you're listening to this and you want more information, as Ken said, feel free to call or go to www.dover.nh.gov and look under the news tab where we'll have updated information. Ken, I appreciate you coming in and talking to us both about Public Works Week and how we celebrate it, but more specifically, the open house.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.